But there you go.
Are we ready?
You've got a few credits. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So,
Thank you.
today, hi guys, how's the argument? What's up? We're going to be discussing consciousness and kind of getting a base understanding of what are the models of consciousness, consciousness, and the world, and how
Your experience of the world. You.
Yeah.
What you experience as you.
What makes consciousness?
what makes consciousness. The different stages of, I suppose, evolution to the point we are at now. Vegetable consciousness. People talk about the evolution of small, sludgy mycology, mushroom consciousness, vegetable consciousness. I think I like that because it shows that maybe there was a spark that had some kind of scintilla of consciousness that helps us evolve and organize, fractalize out.
Yeah.
And I don't know. This was only discussed two days ago. I think we figured we would talk about this.
Right.
I guess it's philosophy. It's yeah.
A little caveat here. I think most of us hopefully we realize the utter hubris of trying to tackle this subject at all, because it's something that has been attempted throughout history by multiple philosophers and now scientists in this day and age, and they still don't have a proper answer, or there's no definitive answer as to what consciousness is. But what I'd hopefully get at is that we can attack it from various different branches of philosophy and maybe make some definitions based on certain, I don't want to call it ideologies, but schools of philosophy, right? So maybe we can get at certain models of consciousness without saying this is the definite model that we believe in, but at least come up with some. You had a good example before we put on the camera
discussion.
Some sketches that could maybe point at the thing we're trying to point at, even though it eludes us. So that's what we are trying. Well, first, like last time, we'll have a little introduction all around and what
Shall we
preconceptions
start with
people
Toby? I think that
come
might
with.
Be a good idea.
Yeah. Start with
This fella has a very keen understanding of and a lot of an articulate way of describing, I think, his own thoughts on consciousness. You've obviously read a few books on consciousness, and we really appreciate you being here today, Toby. So
we're putting the spotlight on you now, very intentionally. Sorry about that. Here you go. You get to start.
So it's possibly the case that I'm outside of the camera view, so I'm being experienced in your consciousness as just an audio phenomenon, but but here I am. So I'm Toby. I'm born and raised in East Londoner, here in Hyde Park with the guys. Thanks for having me. I think the topic is a fascinating topic. It's an important topic to discuss. I think one of the important and interesting components of consciousness is the fact that if we're considering epistemology, what knowledge is, what can we actually know? Well, consciousness is the one thing that we can actually know of all the many things in the world, right? So I'm having an experience, and so I have this conscious experience, and within that experience I'm experiencing many different phenomena. I could be deceived about the phenomena, I could be correct about the phenomena, but either way, whether I'm deceived or whether I'm correct, there are phenomena, and the fact that there are phenomena is evidence of the fact that there is an experience. And so I can be 100% certain about the fact that I'm having an experience, even though I can't be certain about the contents of that experience. And that's a really, really fascinating position of epistemology, because we make all of these claims, knowledge claims, truth claims, certainty claims, but there's nothing that's more certain than the conscious experience itself. And I think that's a really fascinating place to start. Yeah.
wonderful.
Good start. Warming up here to the topic. My name is Kim, and I'm working again here with Christian on moderating the thing. I'll focus a little bit more on moderating this time around. I am very curious about this subject here, because I think it's probably one of the most important subjects to try and grapple with, because when we talk science, when we talk epistemology, what can we actually know? Is there anything that we can know? The first instrument that we use to think in the first place is what we call consciousness. Or maybe not. Maybe there is some underlying things that's actually governing our thinking patterns. But I think it's an interesting and very necessary subject to try and grapple with, and at least try and approximate an answer, even if 1,000 years down the line they'll look and laugh at us and say how wrong they were. Finding this YouTube clip here in the dust and ruin of our civilization, you never know. But yeah, that's my take on it here for the time being. Did you introduce yourself?
Thank you. I go by the name as Wizard. I'm part of the philosophy group that these two gentlemen next to me, and of three, Or four of us. Four of us. God, I'm getting nervous.
No worries. It's all good.
That's where we all go to, and yeah, I drop my thoughts. I tend to avoid this subject because I just don't have I think I don't have the intelligence to reach it yet, or the knowledge. However, so I'm going to give you it in the simplest really way how I experience it. So through my senses that I've developed through evolution, touch, smell, taste, hearing, that's what I can experience as consciousness. And that's really what I can relate to another person, another human being, of what consciousness is, and what happens in the environment that we live in, this planet Earth, in this universe, and the seasonal periods it goes through. And that's all I can really give at the moment. I probably need more time, and as we go talking, things will come to me. But at this moment, I'm giving a very sort of simple
worries, mate.
talk.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
there you go.
Yeah, guys. Cheers.
My name's Chris. You can find me on Odyssey at Newsfist and on YouTube at Malinformed. And I don't know, what am I? I'm an IRL shitposter, I guess.
Troublemaker. Internet troublemaker.
Man, I don't know. This question of consciousness is kind of weird. I guess my two default theories is that consciousness is either the product of a soul or an emergent phenomena caused through insane amounts of biological computing power. But I tend towards the soul explanation. But I don't really know. I mean, we really haven't come any further than Descartes, as you were saying, right? I think, therefore I am. At least I think I am. Therefore I think I am. You know, right? Like it becomes like just, insanely recursive. We're seeing this problem with AI, right? Like if it's an AI and it appears to think and appears to have emotion and appears to have like it passes the Turing test, is it really a consciousness? Some people say yes, some people say no, but no one really knows. There's no sort of real, I don't know, you can't dip something in like a liquid and get a consciousness like reading on it or something. I don't know. It seems like a wank to me.
There are some people that say that 21 grams mystery, when people die, something like 21 grams leaves the body. So there might be some kind of animation or some energetic form that somehow has something measurable there. I don't know, but I believe in some kind of soul. I think it's quite interesting that, and I know I've already done this, but that people who are even atheistic have come to an understanding of some kind of conscious form that helps to guide growth and evolution in the way that we see so many wonderful, beautiful things around us, and the mathematics behind everything. There's some kind of God's speech, logos, mathematics that might be there that I think a lot of even atheists are understanding now. It's interesting, and there might be something there. We have an AI guy here actually today, and I would love it to. All right, maybe your 2 cents. If you're interested, you can be off camera, but I would love your input at some point.
You
Okay,
may
great.
feel the impetus to join later on.
Pavlov, maybe,
Correct us on our grievous mistakes.
Thank you. So we're talking. I'm the mystery guest. I'm not on the camera. I'm going to be outside of it. Sit down. Have a seat, Chris. Don't worry about it.
Bring this table down. Yeah, go for it.
Pavlov is too cool to appear on camera, isn't that right, mate?
Yes. I'm literally shaking. Literally shaking. Okay, so our discussion here is about consciousness. I believe that consciousness is an eventual inevitability of life. As long as life changes, it's inevitable that eventually it's going to achieve a consciousness. And I think that life is an eventual inevitability of the lack thereof life, of matter of sorts. As long as matter exists, there is an eventual possibility of life developing from the primordial soup, which is one of the main theories of how life originated on Earth. And consciousness is Jamie, don't break your teeth, break other people's teeth. Anyway, sorry for that, guys. That was a quick that was a quick break for our sponsors, for Jamie, Jamie the toothbreaker, the dentist, dentistry. Yes, dentistry. Anyway, back to the point. So as I was saying, the consciousness is an eventual inevitability of life. But why does consciousness originate? Consciousness is a tool that life has to exist, that life has to understand the world around it better. Now, on one side, an amoeba can exist perfectly fine. An amoeba doesn't need consciousness to exist. It just grows or it dies. It's as simple as that. And that's the basic purpose of life, to grow or die. It's as simple as that. But an amoeba doesn't have the power to terraform its environment. It doesn't have the power to choose how the world around it is going to be. And I think that's the greatest power of consciousness, when beings start realizing the power in their hands to change the world around them and to make themselves keep existing, to make themselves prevail against a hostile world, because the world is hostile. The whole existence of life is a perpetual conflict, a perpetual war against death.
Okay, sorry, can I interrupt you? What was that word you used? Amoeba?
Amoeba.
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 Oh, okay,
Amoeba
fair
is
enough.
a
Yeah, okay.
unicellular being, like one-celled creature.
Okay.
I'm calling it creature. Creature is a grievous misrepresentation of the word creature. But basically, it's a unicellular.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Being,
Okay,
you
I'm
know
with
what I
you
mean?
there. You are a little bit distant to me, so I'm trying
No worries.
to keep
Sorry,
up
sorry,
with what's
sorry.
being said. So I think that goes for introductions around. I love the enthusiasm.
No worries, no
already
worries.
digging into the subject.
Mustafa, you want to say
Oh yeah,
something?
sure. Go for it.
Just one last.
Sure, I'm the AI guy Chris was talking about, and I'll jump
Off
in if
camera.
they start to talk about
Wise.
machines.
Awesome, man. Thanks very much.
No worries.
Yeah.
That's right. Nice and short.
You know,
Clear to the point.
Can
AI,
I-
neural networking and stuff.
So,
the way our brains work, and it's quite a cool way to talk about these things. And there's a lot of synergy and AI and consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just bring the question out to the group here, so we have a common question we can attack. And the question is quite simply, and we're already getting into it, I think, what is consciousness? Can we define it in a meaningful way or several ways? Are there some kind of definitions we can use that can point at it? And I want to open it up to several definitions, because we're not likely to find the end-all, be-all answer, but at least we can maybe agree on a few different definitions of consciousness. So maybe we can start there. How would you attack that problem? You've already delved a little bit into two definitions. You could see it as the soul, or you could see it as a complex chemical phenomenon.
No, an emergent phenomenon.
An emergent phenomenon.
Yeah.
Okay, can
Yeah.
you go a little bit deeper
Yeah,
into
so
what that would
the
entail?
idea of an emergent phenomena is that you have a bunch of small things that are all operating upon relatively simple rules, like neurons, a really, really good example, right? But when you scale that up by like a couple of billion times, you get sort of synergies, and you get a sort of an emergent phenomena that makes it more complex than the sum of its parts. AI works very much on this principle as well. If you just take any one synthetic neuron in an AI, it's not going to do much. But you get a billion of them all feeding back into one another, and you get these complex behaviors. That's a very materialist, reductionist view, though, and I'm kind of a bit against atheism these days, because look at all the horrible bullshit it's brought us. You know what I mean, right? Like communism and all that.
I'm a bit interested in that. Can you go into that? What kind of horrible bullshit do we get?
Well,
Attacking the branch of thought itself.
communism would be a really, really good
Okay,
example. You
yeah,
know what I
okay,
mean,
fine.
right? Like just, I'm not
Political atheism.
I'm not a big fan of, theocracy either, but I think that if you remove any kind of idea of a soul or a creator, then humans start getting these like weird ideas that, like sort of what
nothing
Pavlov was
matters,
saying, you can
nihilism,
change your environment infinitely, and you get bad outcomes. That's really my only objection.
Obviously, religions have been a kind of that social kind of a cohesion enable like glue that hold many things together, and I think on a more communal level and a societal level. I think it's interesting. I mean, atheists, I think, still have to acknowledge there's something that often there are question marks around a lot of science these days, because there seems to be all these emergent properties Chris was talking about. And if you look at a lot of complexity theory as well, there's this infinite, irreducible, almost complexity that we see around, I mean, just the natural world. And this, the concept of fine, I'll remember it soon. There's a fine tuning that goes, that just is inherent within life, within these different interplays between, I mean, nature and the cosmos and all this kind of thing, and a certain fine tuning that looks too specific and too perfect to just be a cosmic happenstance. So I'm just gonna handle this one because I'm just, my brain's
sure.
we're having
no worries.
an aneurysm already, because this is a
mean,
big topic. But here we go.
Yeah, go for it. I'm looking for various definitions. I've got two main definitions. If we can delve a bit deeper into any of those, that's fine. Or get a third definition.
So,
that would work as well.
I think one way to define consciousness, at least in my view, would be just the fact that the lights are on at all, right? That the fact that there is experience as opposed to non-experience. That the fact that there is something that it is like to be me, right? And then we can abstract that across to say, is there something that it could be like to be, I think Thomas Nagel put this forward, to be a bat, let's say, right? So therefore, now we have other beings that are included within the purview of consciousness, in at least the way that I'm terming it. The fact that there are lights on, that there is an experience to be had as Toby, this human form, and that there is an experience to be had of a bat, and then presumably you could abstract it across further. Now, and I know certain panpsychists might push that all the way to electrons and quarks and things like this, but ultimately, at the very least, we could perhaps say there is something that it is like to be a sentient being, as opposed to not being a being. So being versus non-being, essentially, it's an ontological question in my view.
Mm-hmm. And could you break down the panpsyche for those? I mean, I didn't know this term beforehand, and maybe it's common knowledge for, or should be common knowledge for me, but maybe you can briefly break it down. And would you say it's kind of where those two definitions of a divine understanding of consciousness and an atheistic understanding of consciousness, is it sort of where they meet in the middle? Would that be correct to say?
It seems so. I mean, I'm not a panpsychist scholar, and I think even within panpsychism there's debate about what that even means, and many panpsychists are fighting with each other about what that means.
Right.
But that would be one interpretation, that yes, sure, the divine and the material meet in this place because they posit that consciousness is an inherent property within the universe, and the moment that we separate the subject from the object, we're getting into all of this confusion. And actually, when we realize that consciousness is actually a fundamental building block and is within matter itself. I think that would be their take, but like I say, I'm not really.
Panpsychism is the idea that literally everything is conscious, right? Even electrons, trees, bitumen, like everything. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's also supported by certain branches of quantum theory. The observer-affected universe and all this kind of like other stuff, which is very, very weird. I mean, I got to say that if you have to make an argument for panpsychism, you can do a lot worse than looking at quantum theory. Just the fact that the observer seems to affect quantum experiments does sort of raise very weird questions. Although I've always wondered about this, like, Schrodinger's cat, for example, right? I don't know if they've ever run the two-slit experiment, right, and seen whether it changes if you have a cat looking at it. Or a fruit fly. Like, are there various levels of consciousness, or does I think under conventional quantum theory, as soon as a human observes the result of the experiment, you're going to get this shift between the two quantum states. But I don't know. I'm not a quantum scientist.
Interference part. I don't know. Like, my idea of Schrodinger's cat, and I know it's played out. Lots of people talk about Schrodinger's cat. Everyone on every drama or whatever, they reference this thing. I think I don't know. I can't adequately chat about it right now, but these are thought experiments more than anything else. And I like. Obviously, everyone likes thinking about some physics now and then.
Do you want me to detail what Schrodinger's cat is for the viewers at home?
Sure. I think it's just you might be better at that.
If you can break it down and how it's relevant to the
Yeah, okay, so-
that would be good.
Consciousness,
Right.
the
So,
individual.
Schrodinger's cat is a famous experiment in quantum theory, right? You get a cat, you lock it inside a box with a neutron emitter and a vial of poison. And when the emitter emits a neutron, it triggers the vial of poison, killing the cat, right? Now, until the experiment goes basically that until you open the box and check to see whether the cat is alive or dead, it exists in a superposition of states of being both alive and dead. And it's only when the box is opened that this quantum state collapses into one of two outcomes, that being either the cat is alive or the cat is dead. And this has mangled many, many minds, and I'm not really, I mean, obviously it's just a theoretical experiment. No one's actually, I hope no one's actually locking cat, but I mean, but,
For the sake of science,
for the sake of,
philosophy.
but this is the point, according,
corollary, between the wave function of the wave and the particle collapsing was a problem that physicists were having in the early 20th century, I think, wasn't it? They were not sure, and the double split experiment had kind of sent signals to physicists that there might be something that's really strange at quantum levels. We don't exactly know where the position or the velocity of an electron is until we actually take a look at it and figure that out. It's quantum strangeness, those types of
yeah, but
levels.
it's also due to the measuring devices as well, right? The position momentum thing is the more precisely you measure the momentum, the more you fuck up its position, and the more precisely you measure the position, the more you fuck up the momentum.
Does AI guy know anything about?
Do you,
I thought we were talking about consciousness, not quantum physics.
well, I mean,
go. You might have
yeah, go on.
All right. So it's interesting that you guys started from consciousness and came to a very kind of mystical interpretation of these things. So to quote Schrodinger, the cat story was about demonstrating the concept of quantum entanglement. Is that you can have, but again, no one's ever actually put a cat in a box, and there is a running gag on Futurama where is the cat alive or dead, and they open the box and the cat attacks them. You know what I mean? It's like it's a really pissed off cat in the box. So, but the interesting thing about the double slit experiment and Schrodinger is that most people forget that I think it was Hugh Everett Jr. who came up with the first interpretation of the many worlds theorem. And the many worlds theorem was not some hokey science fiction. It was merely an extrapolation of Schrodinger's equations applied to the entire world. So again, we have not confirmed that the many worlds theorem actually exists. It's not like we sent a probe to a parallel universe or something, but it's if we follow the math to its logical conclusion, that's the conclusion you're going to arrive at. In terms of how that relates to consciousness, is again, I'm coming from a machine learning and AI background. And what machine learning attempts to do, and I stress this word attempts, is it tries to, number one, reduce the faculty of consciousness to easily predictable factors, and tries to mimic certain aspects of it, and not always very successfully. And the key reason for that is when you're working with computers and mathematics, you are fundamentally working with models of the world. And a model, to quote George Box, by definition, models are useful, but fundamentally wrong. So, and this takes us back to your initial question of how do you define consciousness? What is consciousness? A scary thing about human beings and language is that everything we communicate in is a model. A word, a definition, a concept is not
referencing something.
Exactly. It's not the thing. When I say tree, you have an idea of what a tree is, but when you look at an actual tree, it's an infinitely more complex and interesting thing than the concept of a tree. So once you are working with the concept of consciousness versus actual consciousness, we can argue against that all day. And AI, again, AI is something that attempts to mimic, to simulate, but is not the real thing or even close to it. So again, that's generally the conclusion I would have come at in that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's especially AI in its present form nowadays is very, very limited, right? It's really good, as far as I understand it, at hyper-specialized tasks, but it can't really, it's not like it can self-learn or self-regulate that much. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You are 100% correct. We haven't gotten to a point with AI and machine learning. I mean, let's call a spade here. To get.
Is the green light?
Yeah. The green light's on. to get the AI AlphaGo Zero, the AI that basically defeated Lee Sedol and the AI that defeated Lee Sedol, that was a $25 million project with hundreds of GPUs and many man-months of engineering required to build. And that's a thing that plays Go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Say what you will about Go mathematically. There are more combinations in the game of Go than there are atoms in the known universe as far as we know. So it's a very complex mathematical problem.
Right.
But $25 million and nearly a year of engineering for a thing to play a board game.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And that's cutting edge. And I'm not talking about, and this is cutting edge stuff. This is
Yeah.
like we're there, you know,
Yeah.
reinforcement, self-taught reinforcement learning with only knowing the rules of the game.
Yeah.
It doesn't get more high-tech than that. And
yeah.
that's what we can get at. Now you're talking, that guy from Google, Lambda and all of that, those are a class of machine learning algorithms called, get this, transformers. Transformers, yeah.
Like the actual Transformers.
Like
I love it.
Autobots and Decepticons.
Oh,
but
it
no,
makes my child heart happy.
But
Yeah.
no, I wish it was that sexy. All it is, it's an algorithm that transforms sequences to sequences, hence the name Transformer.
Okay,
it takes
hang on.
one sequence and tries to predict or come up with a sequence that is analogous to the one that came up with. So Lambda, and Lambda,
Transforms sequences to sequences.
Yeah.
Just getting this down here. Okay.
it's a sequence-based logic. So instead of giving it one data point, you're giving it a sequence of data points, and it takes into account things like order, placement, stuff like that, and produces a second sequence that is in response to the first one. Now that could be a translation, that could be a social response, that could be any combination of different sequences that come in response to the other.
Okay.
And here's the interesting thing, with things like GPT-3 and Lambda and all of that, they are become so effective that its own engineers, number one, can't predict the outcome, and number two, the Google engineers thought it was actually sentient.
Right. They were actually fooled. by
Yes.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanna get it a little bit back. We're jumping a little bit ahead here, but I like it. We are antsy to get to the AI part, but I just wanna direct the conversation to the last bit of consciousness, because I got 3 definitions now from the group that we can work out from. Right. Just want to summarize them here real quick. We got a divine understanding. We haven't really got into in depth with that. What does it mean when we equate consciousness to the soul? What does that entail, and what does that create? What sequences, you could say, does that create from that, from a philosophical perspective? Then we got definition 2. It's a complex network of synapses. It's a very atheistic view of consciousness. This is sort of my mangled notes on what you said before, Chris. It's sort of the materialistic view of consciousness as sort of a fluke or something that's serving a purpose, perhaps. And then we got the panpsychic that seems to bridge the gap a little bit between these 2 definitions here. Just really quickly rolling over it. But I wanted to ask you guys, do you think then, and we can start from each definition, maybe the easiest one is the first one, does consciousness define humanity? What I mean by that is looking at this humanistic ideology that's presupposing a lot of our laws and how we actually operate in society. We are assuming that humanity has intrinsic value. That seems to be the way that most of our laws and policies are based out upon, right? Or at least that's the intention, this humanistic principle. And it sort of comes from partly a Christian ideal of the human soul, and that has intrinsic value in itself. But then I want to point at, is consciousness the part of us that makes us so valuable, even from a materialistic point of view? From the first definition, it's pretty easy, right? Because you can say every soul is valuable before God. But if we go into the other definitions, is consciousness what makes us valuable? Is it what defines humanity? Or is that too narrow an understanding of humanity? What do you think there? If I can pose this question to the panel.
I would be very quickly in jeopardy of running away with all kinds of different things in my head there. Consciousness, I think, as defines humans and as humanity is regarded. I think, Jesus, I feel like just handing it over to one of you guys. I reckon. It's when you're talking about value, the value of consciousness,
Yes.
the value of humanity. I think these all come from an inner architecture, an inner, also an outside and a communal and collective understanding of the value of life that has grown with us and has percolated through time, because we are thinking, obviously, and feeling individuals, and the feels and the intellect, obviously, is that consciousness. Are we holding this thing in our hands, the emotional land and thinking landscape of humans, and we're saying, is that all consciousness? Can we break consciousness apart? Which is I think a lot of the times psychologists will try and find out what parts of our brain feel more and think more. There's obviously an interplay between these things.
Okay.
But I think I like morphic resonance theory, the morphogenetic field theory.
No, I don't know
which
it.
is quite interesting. I mean, if you look across any plane in the natural world, you'll get bats, you'll get cats, you'll get dogs, you get humans, you get species that have died out and whatever else. Obviously, they are conscious in their own way. Some of them are much more primitive. Dolphins look like they're kind of on a par with us in the way they can communicate. I think it's hard to.
So you're saying there's a natural order in
There is
this
a
genetic
order and a
theory?
beautiful mathematical precision to that order as well, and a feeding, obviously, a presence and coexistence of certain animals, and a feedback in the natural world. We know this well.
Okay.
You just look at the seasons and the way the seasons play upon animals. Animals end up eating other animals. If you look at any sea beach line, the beach line. If you look at individual grains of sand, you're looking at billions of years of crushed up.
So I feel like you're almost broadening out here and saying you can actually attribute a lot of value to many other things beyond humans simply because of the
We're all
complexity
symbiotically
in them.
related in that
And
respect.
like appreciate the amount of complexity that
And we're
goes
talking
to.
about humanity or consciousness and the whole realm of existed, higher existence on this planet. I don't know, man. I'm going to hand this to someone because I'm
That's
already.
actually really interesting.
AI guy. You got something.
Yeah.
AI guy.
I'll go to the camera.
Well, Christian,
You can still pass me the mic.
I'm kind of concerned.
it's a magnet. Yeah. Well, here, you see, Christian, I'm going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works in this conversation.
Go for it.
Have you guys distinguished between consciousness and intelligence? Because because I can tell you right now, right here, I can mimic intelligence with machinery, but I can't mimic consciousness. So how do you draw the line between the two?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I read about what's it called now? Applied consciousness and phenomenology. Phenomenal consciousness. I can't say the word. Phenomenological, I think so. Yes.
Work on
so
that.
the one is like the experience of consciousness. That's trying to encapsulate like the human experience of going through things. It's almost like what you would try and mimic in, say, a novel or a really good film or something like that. The other is applied consciousness. That's all the abilities that consciousness grants us, right? The ability to reason, the ability to be aware, the ability to think. Intelligence is part of that.
What the hell is consciousness? Is that, I mean, this is the thing. It's our brains are designed to take in information, and we have our neocortex, which deals with reasoning, reducing down our more limbic system, the reptilian complex as well, which is much more fundamental, much more primal.
Yeah.
It's our heart-based feel system, deals with fight and flight.
But Christian, like
Get it? Yeah. Go for
this
it.
this question about the brain, I think I've always thought of it a bit like this, right? You can't find the soul in the brain any more than you can find the presenters on the 9 o'clock news by taking apart your TV, right? You can injure your TV in all these kinds of ways, and you'll see all kinds of weirdness, and the screen might go wobbly, right? But the people on the 9 o'clock news are not in your TV, right? They are merely picking up on a transmission of some kind that, I guess religious people would argue is the divine emanation of the soul. I mean, what was your original question about the value of...
Yes, the value of human life. Why is humanity so valuable? Is it because of our consciousness? That's essentially the question. And I think the interesting question you laid out is you point more specifically at, what is it in consciousness that we should deem as valuable? Is it the intelligence part? Is it the experience part? What exact part? So we can get even more specific about which parts of consciousness do we value. Because you could say, if you value human intelligence, you might just value it from a utilitarian point of view, right? It might be, well, human intelligence is valuable because it can produce things and it can make life better for a lot of people.
I mean,
it's got utility.
Introducing value into the equation is a weird one. I mean,
we compute our own value.
well, no, yeah, because
We find our
value
own
is subjective, right? If you take the Catholic view, all souls are sort of valuable to God. If you take the Orthodox view, only souls that are following the Orthodox Church are valuable
Right.
to God, right? So you've got
Sure.
the sort of
Yeah.
ecumenist, like universalist thing that to God, even the soul of a Muslim, for example, is valuable. Whereas the Orthodox view is no, you've got to be part of that particular church to
Yeah.
be
Right.
valuable. I think I'm getting that right, or at least there is a
Hopefully.
differentiation
I can't
in
tell
values.
if you're not. I'm not steeped in it, but yeah.
Not quite. I've been an Orthodox Christian myself in the past, as you guys know. I think I explained you this before. It's more of an increased value for people who are Orthodox Christians. It's not that other people's souls have no value, but being an Orthodox Christian is like the right thing to do. It's like you need to be an Orthodox Christian. You go to paradise, you do good things, blah blah, all that good stuff. All that stuff. It's not that other souls have no value. I wouldn't say that. I would not go as far as that. But yes, you're right to an extent. They do give more value to Orthodox souls because like they're doing the right thing. They're doing the right.
Can I
stuff.
just bring it a little bit to, so the point of the question was to try and attribute, is there some kind of value to consciousness? What I find interesting, you bring up religion here. What I find interesting is, for example, say Zen Buddhism or Buddhism to a degree would say that what you experience as consciousness is just an illusion, right? It's not really the important part of you. That's just a veil over the truth in a way. So it's interesting to have like different ideas of, is it valuable or is it just like a random fluke, or is it valuable for its utility? Is it valuable in and of itself? And I actually wanted to hear if you wanted to pitch something to the table here, because okay, fair enough.
Well, it's the reason I asked about intelligence is basically on the back of your question.
Yeah.
Is like, does consciousness make humans more valuable? And that led me to think, and all the answers that came out was about intelligence. It was not about consciousness. And there's no debate over here that, as far as we know, humans are the most intelligent species on this planet.
Right.
But are we the most conscious? Are we quantitatively more or less conscious than a squirrel? Is it exactly under every criteria? Again, because if we're going to go with, say, no, humans have more neurons, therefore they are more conscious, that works under the criteria. But no, humans have souls because they believe in religion and squirrels don't. Again, you see, it can change in the criteria. But from again my own perspective, if we're going to come with any definition of consciousness, humans are not more or less conscious. We just happen to be more intelligent and navigate and interrogate these ideas more effectively than, say, another animal that would have no reason to interrogate these ideas.
Yeah, also just to build upon that, just an idea that came to me was with regards to the difference between intelligence and consciousness, for example. And again, linking it to epistemology in the sense that I know that I'm having a conscious experience because I am in fact having one, right? But I can't be sure about you guys, in fact, right? So certainly it does appear to me that you're displaying behaviors which I could attribute to some degree of intelligence, but I have, at least within my experience, have no evidence that you are actually having an experience of your own intelligibility. And so you guys could simply be just robot mechanisms in my experience. And so that raises the question: how can we actually measure whether something is conscious? Right? How would we even go there? Because as far as I can tell, I can only measure my own consciousness by simply having the experience. But I do not know about you. You could be tremendously intelligent, but that does not necessarily make you conscious.
We can measure sentience, which is slightly different. Sentience is the idea of being cognizant of your own existence. So you could make an argument, I don't know how robust this is, but you can make an argument that if something can look in a mirror and recognize itself, then it has a certain amount of sentience. It can recognize that it exists within the world. I think that's easier to pin down than consciousness, you know what I mean? Because you could then make the argument that, you know, a squirrel isn't sentient because it doesn't recognize itself in a mirror. But I don't know, it's probably a bit shaky. But consciousness is such a... I don't know.
Right.
I mean,
But with sentience, though, so for example, wouldn't some definitions of sentience, including the ability to experience, let's say, pain, for example, so we presumably would say that animals are sentient beings, and that's generally, as far as I know, generally accepted.
Some semblance of sentience, right?
Sure.
Based on what we
Like
can see.
squirrels don't go to church; they don't have squirrel universities, as far as I know, right?
Sure.
But they do all right.
Maybe that tree-
I mean, cartoons
tree is the
like,
church, in fact,
all day
yes.
long. Like the animals are farthing wood and stuff. It's awesome. But so I think there's just levels of complexity that lend themselves. If you're going to look at the animal kingdom and all the way to humans and so on, there's just so much more complexity with animals, with creatures like us who have quite distinctive neocortexes, which are evolved to the point where we can think inside our heads. I can I can have conversations with myself all day long, decide what I want for dinner, go and cook that thing, not just grab it and eat it, you know. I think there's obviously, as I said, this morphic field theory just enables us to look at the animal kingdom, I guess, and say that there are primitive forms of consciousness that animals, that fish might have. But we, as humans, have evolved over time. There have been these periods of distinct explosions into ever quicker states of evolution, I think, as well. And I like this because you can see the mathematics, the mathematical approach to the way that our brains grow and the quickening of an evolutionary curve when things get more and more complex, right?
Sure, but I don't think we necessarily need to go down the rabbit hole of complexity in order to address consciousness, right?
Right.
Maybe there is a possible binary expression of this, in the sense that there's either consciousness or there's not, right?
Yeah,
right?
sure.
We can get to complexity, right, in terms of intelligibility, in terms of all of this tremendous computing power that is required to simulate a human brain versus much less sophisticated computers that we were required to simulate other types of creatures, let's say. But the fact that there is an experience must be a binary. It must be a binary.
Right.
There's either experience or there's
Or
not.
there's not. And if there's not experience, taken to its logical conclusion, what would that entail? That would entail, I'm guessing, that the thing we see as experience is just an illusion, or it's a trick of the mind, so to speak. It's not real, or it's not.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to say, I think people make assumptions on consciousness, on our level of consciousness today, on, say, just the way that this conversation is going and the complexity that we're trying to penetrate just with this conversation. The way you just look at someone and you can assume a lot about them. These all come from these higher, or the more complex, I suppose, the brain, the more complex the whole architecture of the experience itself, right? So small little bacterium, they look around, they go for something, they do this, they go something, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
But again, I think this is still a conversation of intelligence. I think this is about ability to abstract, second order thinking, executive function, complexity. It's all these. It's certainly all of these things.
I think it absolutely is a question of intelligence, because consciousness is intelligence. It comes from intelligence. With no intelligence, there can never be conscience. Or consciousness in this case. Both of them, either of them. In this case, I can use either of them. First comes life, then comes intelligence, then comes consciousness. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that.
Might be the third order
That's what I
thing,
wanted to say when Mustafa
Yeah.
was speaking about this.
Yeah.
The distinction between consciousness and intelligence is that intelligence encompasses a huge amount of things, a lot more than just consciousness. And consciousness is a very specific next step after intelligence. A squirrel is intelligent to an extent. It's not completely dumb. It's not an amoeba in terms of intelligence. It's not going to solve any mathematical problems, but it knows what's a nut. It knows how to eat the nut. It knows how to hide from the fox. and all that stuff. You know what I mean? An amoeba won't do any of that. A squirrel has intelligence; it just doesn't have consciousness. That's the first point. Second point, you were delving a bit close to solipsism, which you were talking about a while ago, which is not an issue. Nothing wrong with solipsism, but I'm not a solipsist.
I'm also not, but it's an interesting place to begin a conversation.
Yeah. But solipsism is a very terrifying idea. That,
Do you want to just define it maybe?
Yeah, let's define that, please.
that simply put, solipsism is the idea that in this world, the only thing that exists is me.
Right.
In other words,
That's pretty terrifying.
I know.
only thing I can be certain
In other
of.
words, if I'm a solipsist, I believe only I exist, and every single other person on Earth is just a fragment of my imagination, a fragment of myself. If he's a solipsist, he believes that he's the only thing that exists. Everybody else is just a fragment of his imagination. There's deviations between different solipsists. There's the brain in the jar theory. There's the different.
I like this.
A few different
The
views.
idea you can get to a religious understanding of this and say we are all fractals of the great intelligence, the great Godhead, up somewhere behind everything else.
In a
Me and
way,
you are
except you
actually
see
the same
yourself
thing.
as
We're
God,
made of
as
the
a
same-
solipsist.
Yeah, you see yourself as the navel of the universe. You're the only thing that you're certain of.
You're the
so
only
you
thing
must
that
be the
exists.
greatest.
Yeah,
Exactly.
no, that's
But
not the same, I guess.
The
Yeah,
interesting
sorry.
thing is, and the reason why I seem to allude towards a solipsistic position, even though I don't in fact hold it, is because it's the only position I can be certain of, which is a really interesting thing to be to really consider. It's the only thing that I can be certain of, and then we can build outwards, and I can develop all sorts of models and interpretations about what might be going on, but those would be interpretations and models and theories and understandings. But the thing that I can be absolutely certain about, the thing that I can be absolutely certain about is the solipsistic position. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I am a solipsist, I guess. It just means that that's
It's
the.
extreme. You do whatever you liked in the world. No one would matter to you. These would all just be. Everyone would be just a kind of trinket or a toy or a pawn in your own grand game.
No, so a solipsist might make that. I don't necessarily think that they would make that point, because I think there might, even within one's own mind, that there would still be fundamental rules and systems which one needs to abide by, right?
Oh, right,
But I think it's just the case of, if we're actually talking about epistemological certainty, right? The only position you can actually be certain about is that position. That's not to say that there are other positions, but the one that with absolute certainty is that I am having an experience. It could well be the case that you guys are conscious beings, right? But I just don't know for absolute. With absolute certainty.
You have to take some assumptions, because it's back to Descartes. It's everything could be a lie, everything could be a trick. I'm not sure. The only baseline truth that I'm exactly certain of is I know I'm thinking these things, but everything could be the Matrix or an illusion spun around me. I want to move a little bit on and getting back to AI, because that was originally the plan of discussion here. Did you have a final point that you wanted to bring
I
across
wanted
there?
to say one more thing.
Go for it.
Ironically, it was about something that you said.
Go for it.
Yeah, so when you were speaking about this a while ago, about you either have an experience or you don't, you either have conscience or don't.
Yeah.
You either have consciousness or not, or you don't. I don't quite agree with that. I think it's more of a question of how much do you have, how true a
so it's
statement
like a
is.
spectrum.
Yes, it's not a statement of yes, this is absolute true, this is an absolute lie. It's more of an how true is it, how much of a lie is it, how much truth is there to this statement. And that's also what brought, what reminded me in what you were saying about the statement that we're having an experience. That's the only thing we can be certain about. Sure, to a large extent, yes. But as finite beings, we are not capable to perceive infinite emotions, infinite certainty, absolute and utter, unquestionable ideas. You know what I mean? We can be completely certain, sure, but it's limited to our being, to our understanding. You see what I mean? For example, I'm absolutely certain I'm sitting here right now in front of you guys, right? But I'm not an absolute authority. I don't consider myself to be an absolute authority on this. I could, there are things that I could be wrong about. You see what I mean? I had this discussion long ago with some Habibis in the park, and obviously, they started saying, "Oh, you're not certain you exist." Ha 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 ha. It's
You have to make some assumptions, right? And that's sort of a choice. You're choosing to say, okay, well, this might be the only certainty, but I am assuming that there is a reality out there that is separate from ourselves.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
basically
I
what we're
completely
basing
agree.
We have this
I completely
experience
agree.
and things are more or less like they were the day before.
You know, that leads me to the last point I wanted to make about, you know, in this part, which is the value of consciousness.
Yeah.
How valuable is it? This is where we started, and
Yep.
this is where we're ending. You know, this
Full circle. Go for it.
this
Yeah,
part,
yeah.
full circle.
Yeah.
It's a full circle now. So I think there is indeed value in consciousness. There is value in intelligence. There is value in life, because the way I see it, it's a of how should I define it? It's an advanced existence to simply matter. I see life, I see a living being as something of more value than a rock on the ground. I see it as more value than a glass of water. I mean, unless I'm dying of thirst, of course. But that's
And
that's
where is
besides
that
the
value
point.
coming from? Why
That
is
value, a very good question. That value comes from the metamorphosis, from change, from evolution. The more evolved an existence is, the more value it has in my eyes. That means that a human will always, inadvertently, have more value than an animal, an inhuman being, and being with no consciousness, with no intelligence, or at least to a lesser degree of
Is
a
it
human.
because it took more energy and effort and complexity to produce a human than, say, a robot?
Partially, and
We have
also
a
because
relationship to
and also because
humans,
it's
and
less likely. It's very likely in the universe to find rocks. You can find them anywhere. They're dead. They're just minerals, right?
Okay, so
But
it's a
humans-
rarity thing as well. Okay.
Exactly, it's a rarity thing. Why are diamonds valuable? Well, they're one of the hardest substances we can find on Earth, sure, but it's also because they're so unbelievably rare. If the Earth was full of diamonds everywhere, they would never be as
Yeah,
valuable.
there's much value.
You see what I mean? And that's part of the reason why I see a lot of value in humanity, a lot of value in life, and a huge amount of value in consciousness.
Would the value of humanity go down then the more we became?
The more we,
The more
the
we
more
multiplied,
humans there
would our
are,
value
will the
go
value
down?
of humanity go down? Yes and no. The value of each individual human will go down. Yes, it goes down the more humans there are, but the value of a unique individual does not go down, because the unique individuals are still very rare to find. And I think although the rarity, for example, look. Let's bring.
Okay, let's wrap that up.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, let's wrap that up. Fair enough, but you know,
Could
if
I
there if there was like one nation of 1 million people, obviously the value of that million people would be far greater than the value of 1 million people in our current society. Why is that? Because if that million of people gets lost, humanity disappears. That's it. We're dust. We're nothing. But if 1 million people are lost in the current society, we keep moving on.
It's less of an impact for the human
It's-
race. Okay.
It's much far lesser impact.
Yeah, let's
Make a
absolutely.
couple of points.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
One, the reason why I mentioned about this binary position on consciousness is even if we consider the spectrum, the fact that there is a spectrum as opposed to no spectrum raises the question as to so on a spectrum you have, let's say, between 0 to 100, right? 0 means no conscious experience. And between 1 and 100 is conscious experience. So you can have various different gradations of conscious experience, let's say, but the fact that you can have no conscious experience versus conscious experience means that the entire spectrum is framed within the binary position. So you have the many within the binary. Then the other thing that I was mentioning with regards to the fact that I cannot be sure about the conscious experiences that you guys might be having, it wasn't just to maybe reiterate this solipsistic position, it was to say that it makes the testability of consciousness a very difficult proposition. That's all I was claiming, because then how can we then test for that? Right. I would have to
Not
be having that
possible,
experience to be able to prove that there was a conscious experience.
Yeah.
It becomes very difficult. And maybe we could say, we can have all of these sentience tests for human beings that could give us some kind of indicator that consciousness could be occurring. There would be maybe there's a correlation there, but that doesn't necessarily prove consciousness itself. It could just be proof of a really intelligent system, a really intelligent robot.
Smart simulator.
Right, and therefore
Yeah.
it makes it very difficult with regards to AI to test whether it is in fact conscious or just hyper intelligent.
Right.
Interesting.
Should we bring in AI guy now, very quickly? Does AI go on?
But
No,
just
it's fine,
just
it's
before we do that,
AI guy.
I want to skip. There was one question I prepared. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to jump straight into light because we've talked a bit about AI now. We've grappled with consciousness, distinguishing between intelligence. You were saying intelligence comes before consciousness. Interesting proposition. I'm not sure I would agree with it necessarily, but I think it's an interesting place to start from, because assuming then that we get to a point where AI becomes so complicated and so sophisticated that it can actually mimic human intelligence perfectly, and it can actually mimic human intelligence better. It would be better at learning, it would be better at absorbing things, it would be better at building, so it does all the things that humans do from the outside, right? Would we have to treat that thing as consciousness, even if it's just having a fraction of what we define as consciousness? Would it then count as consciousness? And that's why I wanted to get at the value of consciousness as well, because would we then have to define AI machines as something that is valuable or has some value approximate to humans and should be treated equally in that sense?
That's an interesting way to put it. I'll give it to Mustafa, but I'll just answer a short little bit of what you said. That's very true. I did say that intelligence comes before consciousness. It starts before consciousness, right? But it does. I didn't say that it ends after consciousness. So, in other words, intelligence encompasses consciousness inside of it, but it could go beyond consciousness.
I think our
potentially.
understanding of
You
consciousness
know what I mean?
probably is very much hinges on our ability to now be extremely, just be intelligent and intelligently grasp these higher faculties and the meaning of life, the meaning of why we're here, where our relationship to the world around us, nature, God maybe. And it is, I think it's something that comes with a higher intelligence. I don't really see too many squirrels opening squirrel philosophy books and stuff and reading in the park on the Sunday here. Anyway, I think Mustafa, did you want to say anything? Because we like your input.
Oh, there was a question. All right. So there was an interesting thought experiment. Just to answer that question is, so where does thunder come from? Where does thunder come from? An easy answer for a human being to assimilate is Thor. Thunder comes from Thor.
Right.
And all of you can right now, you can imagine Thor. You can imagine a guy with a hammer and walking around and everything. Thor is very easy to understand. Try to program Thor. Try to write a program that simulates Thor. It's going to be very difficult and it'll probably not work. But what if I take some of Maxwell's equations on thermodynamics and electricity, I put in some noise and a random number generator, and I can possibly predict the outcome of thunderstorms around the world if I input some realistic data. So what I've done is I've taken the same problem and translated it to a different mind. The mind in this case is a computer. And what happens? When I take math and turn it into a program, I get a much more reliable version than something that is immediately understandable to a human being, which is Thor. You see where I'm coming from? So a large part of the problem of the question that we're asking is that we can only see consciousness from a purely human perspective, because it's a natural part of who we are. So we are naturally going to default to our strengths, that is intelligence, that is resourcefulness, that is things like that. But if an elephant could speak, would it value intelligence as highly as it would say size? No, size is the most important thing. Or an ant, productivity is the most important thing.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, we are defaulting to the strengths and capabilities that our brains are hardwired to pick up on. Rather than to defer that to a completely different mind, you're going to get a completely different answer.
Right.
So would you say it's the framing of the question itself is a very human-centric, maybe even human narcissistic point of view, sort of?
The environments we live in, the way, what our immediate needs, our concerns, our desires all frame our understanding of intelligence and consciousness, I suppose. And we prefer certain things in this world. We tend to focus on philosophers, whatever, on certain things that engage us and that help us understand our own bodies, our own hands and feet. And Thor, that's a great example.
Absolutely.
That's,
To quote what you're saying, it's like, and So I'm not here to diminish what human beings are as a species. I mean, I'm not the person who's going to do that anyway. I'm a human too. But the key aspect that we need to figure out is when we're discussing consciousness is to dissociate it from who we are and our biology. And that is a challenge because, let's be honest, we're pretty bad at that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, just raising that awareness.
But it's interesting, right? That's also why I wanted to get to the value of consciousness. What is it exactly about consciousness we value? Because if we value the utilitarian, the usefulness of it like an asset, right? We value intelligence as an asset. What if computers, and if that's the key reason we value humans, what if a computer is able to display exactly the same things, even just as a simulacrum, even just as simulating those things? Should we then value that computer equally because it can simulate the utility of intelligence? Or is there something wholly about the experience itself that is above, say, computers? Yeah.
When maybe you have what is the point of when it reaches?
Cameraman speaking here.
This is what it's become. But what if this means to a point where consciousness can develop its own self-awareness? Would morality be a sign of this? I mean, for instance, monkeys, how they behave with each other. Some will rip off each other's fingers just for climbing the hierarchical ladder, and some will actually take care of each other. And would we only value something like that? Can we only understand it as can we only understand it through morality, maybe? Consciousness, yeah.
Well, complexity helps. I think complexity helps us understand, I think, our relationship to the world around us, the interdependence that we rely on in other people, in friends and relationships, in family structure, the interdependence on nature that we have, on good air to breathe every day, and all of this obviously feeds into our perception of consciousness. I think our creative minds, and Mustafa might be able to help us here, fed into our world way before any kind of mathematical sense of what was really going on with the things around us. We created, I think, deities first that helped us, and we personified, anthropomorphized ourselves onto the world, created gods that looked like you, wizard, and so on. And I think that might have helped us, or maybe distorted our view of how really to perceive things properly and at the core level. I think the Thor analogy, pow pow, creating thunder, it would have probably just been a second nature to just go there as primitive humans. And it's a creative story as well. We can teach our children this, and it's cool.
Okay. So we're coming towards the end here, time-wise. We're getting around an hour. We wanted to have it around an hour, but let's just start closing the subject here, even though it's difficult to get like
it's hard work, man. This is the hardest subject. Everything after this will be so fucking easy.
Yeah, well, we got a new participant over here.
I was going to just say one small thing. I was going to say,
sure.
When it comes to intelligence and computers or robots, whatever, I'll just say that they just mimic it. So they can mimic us so well that we will be fooled or deceived, right? Like if it was like a teddy bear and it can say "I love you," it's not. It's just mimicking what it's told to do. So robots can mimic in such a way that we feel it's real, but it's still not real. So I would never give it the same values as humans, because there's a deeper layer to us that what we actually feel. Robots would mimic feeling, but it's not actual feelings. I wouldn't give it the same values.
So if I could just add to that, they may or may not be having an experience. I don't know if we'd be able to test for it. So they may be just purely be mimicking, or they may actually be having an experience. But how we would be able to discern whether they're having an experience or not, in my view, would be impossible.
I would say that when it comes to that, till we understand what consciousness is, right, all I can say is robots mimic. So we're stuck at the problem of what is consciousness, what makes consciousness consciousness, right? So,
but you'd be drawing a conclusion, because you'd be drawing a conclusion and saying they mimic, which is basically doing away with the fact that they could in fact be conscious. When I think the intellectually honest position to take would be we actually don't know whether they're having a conscious experience or not.
Okay,
It's
so
it's based on
do you have an
assumption.
idea?
Yeah.
Would you have an idea of when a robot is doing it or just mimicking?
My point is I don't think we would be able to tell. They could be fooling us, right? They could be fooling us and not having a conscious experience, but they could not be fooling us and actually having a conscious experience, and we would have no way to be able to tell. That's what I'm
I
saying.
think till that day, I think we have to figure out what consciousness is. So that would be.
Yeah, what we've been trying to figure out here before you came. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, let's reverse the equation. Let's not make it about a computer. Let's make it about a human being. A human being can commit suicide, correct? Now, this runs contrary to all of our instincts and all of our biological drives, and a human being can kill themselves.
They
Now-
shouldn't do that. Right. Got it. Yeah.
No, that's
I
not-
see it from the biological equation. Sorry, go on.
That's not what I'm saying at all. But
okay.
anyway, so some can take that as an argument for if a human being can run completely contrary to its biological and
That's what I
instinctive
mean.
drives, therefore we can deduce that this is conscious.
Yeah.
A second dimension, again, because it's not about intelligence, it's not like it's literally going against every biological programming it has. It's
Yeah.
not compelled to do it.
Yeah.
But
Apart from the biological drive that leads to suicide, though, no?
well, that's what I'm getting to. That's what I'm getting to. So that's an argument. But at the same time, you could also say that no, the conditions of this person's upbringing, the experiences of their environment, the things that were largely outside of his control, a predilection for depression, for example, a lack of access to social opportunities, all external factors that have contributed to pushing this man to this decision to go and kill themselves. So again, can we say conclusively that he made this decision consciously, or were there a lot of factors that pushed him towards a specific outcome? Again, you can make the argument for both, depending on where you want to stand. So there's a running joke in the AI community that you can have the Turing test, which is a computer convinces you that it's a human, but then there's the second grade of the Turing test. Do you know what that is?
If you know that it's a computer and it still can convince
No, when the computer convinces you that you're not a human.
I feel like that's a good.
That's the second dimension that the computer is so successful at hacking human emotions that it
Well.
successfully convinces you that you are not
just a
actually a human being.
program. There
You're
you
a
go.
simulation.
There you go. I feel like that's an excellent closing remark, but I just want to give people a chance here to close it off before we turn off the camera. Potentially talk about this afterwards. But are there any further, like, you've just joined, you've only had the opportunity to come here at the end.
Want to close too?
But thanks for your contribution. Is there anything you want to say?
Last to join, first to close.
Yeah, I'll just probably just say one last thing. I'll just say I think till we understand what consciousness is, ultimately we'll always be stuck on the concept of AI as knowing if they're conscious or not. I think that's just as basic as
So
I can get.
the question would be moot, but if until we define consciousness, which seems very much out of our grasp, is that what you would say?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Or we. I don't see. Maybe there might be another way, but I don't see any other way of how from that we can figure out how AI is, unless we start knowing more about consciousness and how it relates to us
Okay.
and robots.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
So I wanted to say something, just a little something about when they were talking about the teddy bear. I like the teddy bear example because it speaks a little bit about what I want to say a while ago, but didn't get the chance for that. Basically, the teddy bear is, yeah, sure, he's emulating human emotion, but he's reacting. There's a reaction in the teddy bear. You press a button, the teddy bear says, "I love you," or something like that. You know, something like that happens. It's a very similar thing with humans in the end, the way I see it. Humans are beings that react to the outside world. It's just that it's a very, very complex reaction. It's not as simple as you press a button, human says, "I love you." It's you press specific psychological buttons and the human will start loving
But it's the
you.
same principle.
It's
I
the
get what you're
same
getting at,
principle.
yeah.
It's just huge amount of complexity behind it. I know it sounds I know it sounds very cold, but I know it sounds very cold, but in the end of the day, I think that is kind of what it is. In the end.
That's interesting because that's the biomechanical view of human beings, mostly as very complex machines, and that's what I wanted to tease that opinion out because I wanted to compare then to AI. If we see humans as just very complex machines, why don't we give the same potential rights or treat very complex machines in the future the same way? if that's how we see humanity, right? That was one thing I wanted to get
Because
at.
of the
But we
instinct
can
of
go-
self-preservation. The instinct of self-preservation needs to trump any kind of pragmatism, anything else. The
Okay.
instinct of self-preservation is the most important thing for any living being in existence. You need to keep existing, and that's the biggest achievement for any kind of life. That's the biggest value. And by the way, something I didn't manage to finish last time that I was speaking about this is that a diamond is rare, is valuable because it's rare, yeah, but it's also rare. It's also valuable because it's useful to humans. If it was useless to humans, if it was like some kind of a little slime that's really rare, but you can't use it for anything, it would still not add any value to it, even though it's very rare. You know what I mean? That's also something very important. In other words, consciousness adds value to humans because it's useful to humans, because it makes humans prevail in the world, makes humans keep existing, it makes humans basically take over the world
okay.
that, in
Yeah.
which they were born. That's
So
what I...
yeah, it's interesting. That's sort of the human-centric view that we are allowed to treat ourselves as high as everyone because it's just in our biological programming to survive. So that kind of gives us a free pass to it. Did you want to add something here in the end? Okay, you're fine. Yeah, let's go on.
We don't know what consciousness is. We haven't known for ages. A lot of what, I forgot your name. Toby was saying you're basically just restating Rene Descartes, right? From like 17th century. I think, therefore I am. All this. We don't know what consciousness is, but I can tell you one thing: what humans define consciousness as has a real effect. So, if we take the view that Pavlov was expressing, or the Yuval Noah Harari sort of view that humans are just bunches of algorithms and there's really no difference between humans and AI, and humans have no intrinsic value, there is no God, then there is also no reason not to exploit or destroy or manipulate humans. There is no intrinsic value. So perhaps a bigger question is, how does the way humanity views what consciousness is affect the way they affect the humans around them?
Excellent. Well stated. That's what I wanted to get at, but I couldn't verbalize it. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we can probably do
I
a.
have to answer something, just a quick answer.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
I didn't say humans have no value. I just express value in a different way. I think value consists in the usefulness humans can find in the things around in the world and in what it contributes to the human instinct of self-preservation and expansion into the universe in which they exist. That for me is the value. I'm not saying human life has no value, it has a huge amount of value. But
I think we can build beautiful models on what an establish an understanding of humanity, the way we have a lot of drives, instincts, and desires that we've been able to harness over time. And with these new big neocortexes, we have the biggest among the animal kingdom, I think. We're a pretty cool animal, and I think consciousness, whatever the fuck it is, it's very confusing. It can be very difficult, but I think we live in a beautiful world with tons of this ability to just project our consciousness, our felt experiences onto the natural world, create amazing things, harness nature to a point, which I think is amazing, send people up to the moon and stuff like that, and then Mars, whatever else coming next. And I think that, we're understanding and integrating our understanding of consciousness with AI now is going to be a great next kind of logical step. And I do believe with the keeping a fresh idea here and an open mind will enable us to peer deeper into consciousness, I hope, and fundamentally one day understand it and write a book on it that actually makes complete sense.
Yeah.
That we can do scientific experiments on and replicate and all the rest, and that's great.
Oh, excellent. Sorry. I really like the practical approach there, Chris, of like looking at, we may not be able to define, it may be hopeless to define, but the definition that we assume for consciousness is very relevant to how we actually treat humans or treat things that we suspect could be conscious. You know, so it does matter at the end of the day, because it rank orders the value system going down, right? And what I wanted to say there also is, maybe I'm starting to think as well that maybe I wouldn't want to know exactly what consciousness is at the end of the day, because that would also it would reduce it in size or in importance if it loses some of that mysticism.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. So maybe the mysticism in and of itself has some value, and maybe you could say that it's a conjurer's trick, but at least it gives us a sense of wonder about the world that I felt like
cannot be,
that I felt that you expressed.
It makes humans feel smaller and respect the universe. You know, when you take the large mechanistic view, we understand everything that has been ever to be understood. We know everything. Generally in history, you get horrible stuff happening after that, because this idea,
as you said, we've seen practical examples.
Yeah, but it locks off the idea that there's anything more to learn. Or
when you know everything, when you're free to do anything, what do you do, and what do you know? What do you learn?
Yeah.
What happens next? Meh. Boring. Okay.
Yeah, I actually think that take on the pragmatic component of how we interpret consciousness being very, very consequential in terms of how the universe itself then plays out is actually an interesting point to make. I mean, it could be the case that the many different religions have identified either as individuals as important, or as groups as important, or as all sentient beings as important, as some kind of pragmatic attempt to try to deal with the problem of nihilism, that perhaps we live in this mechanistic universe where everything is based upon causality, and therefore things are just unfolding. And how do we account for that? Okay, let's try to develop some kind of model to interpret the universe which has a better quality of experience as opposed to a worse quality of experience. And certainly living with a nihilistic viewpoint generally leads to a pretty bad quality of life, either at least for the individual, but also for the society itself. So that was an interesting point. From my personal perspective with regards to how we go forwards in terms of discussing consciousness, I actually don't think that we will ever solve this. I'm not confident on this. I think it's a very optimistic position to take, that we just need to play the scientific game for long enough, and then we'll figure out all of the answers to everything. And I think there are some things which are completely beyond our understanding and comprehension, and that no amount of computational power, either from the human brain or some systems that we develop to try to help us understand things further, may get us to some of these answers. It might be the case that this remains a mystery, and it remains a mystery for until the end of time. That isn't to say that there isn't an answer. It just might be that the answer might be beyond the reach of our capacity. And so, therefore, I would take some kind of pragmatic view on this and try my best to treat others as though they are conscious beings, and that their quality of life really matters.
Yeah, and unless I'm convinced otherwise, I would agree with that sentiment. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Say anything.
Closing
I came
remarks.
at the end.
How much time have we spent so far? Can you see that? What's their clock there?
So we're coming up to 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
All right, that's a good point to start ending. But you
Yeah,
can,
I mean, it looks like you pretty much covered everything. Just one slight point I thought I'd make is that there's two issues. There's not being able to do something because it's too difficult, but not necessarily in principle you can't be done. It's just like, people can't pick up, let's say, 5 cars, but it's not because in principle they can't pick up weight. It's just that 5 cars is too difficult, or whatever, 10 cars, whatever it is. Human beings have a limited amount of weight that they can pick up. But there's some things that might be in principle that we cannot do, and it could be in consciousness is something that in principle we cannot do. We don't know that it's something that in principle that we can understand. That's what I want to say.
Okay. All right.
The answer might be really boring at the end of it anyway.
Maybe it's better we don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Like 42.
Okay. I feel like we
great.
we're
This
ready
was
to close
actually
up.
really cool. I had
Yeah.
a fantastic time.
I
think there
enjoyed
was
this.
some awesome input from everyone in this semicircle here. Please like and share and subscribe if you
Hit that
enjoyed
thumbs
it.
up.
Smash
Like
that
your
like
life
Smash
button.
the shit out of the like button. Stomp on it and break your devices if you have to. It's all good.
Abuse the AI in our favor for the algorithm.
Yeah, for sure. I will be back next week, I think.
Yeah.
We'll be doing something else. We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Wizard.
Yeah.
Sorry, man. Do you want to say something?
Oh no! I mean, I was just like that's it. It's 120.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Nice one.
And scene.